Juan, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Yeah. Okay, welcome you to this virtual webinar, the World River and Delta System Source to Sink webinar series. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We have some audience also on our YouTube channels, the live stream broadcast. So today we are very happy to invite Professor Juan Restrepo from Colombia. He is the first speaker from Colombia. That's make our talk series more diverse. So he come here talk about the very interesting and famous major river in Colombia, Magdalena River. So before I introduce Juan, so this month in June, we have 2 more talks. So next Wednesday, we have Paul Schuster from UATS come here talk about the Yukon River. And then followed by that, Ji-Xiong will come talk about Lower Mississippi River. So I think in July, we'll have a summer break, and then we resume our talk in August. So there's already a bunch of good talk lined up. So if you want to give a talk, or if your postdoc or PhD candidate student are also able to contribute a source to sink related talk, please let me know so we can put them in the 4th semester. And so once again, this talk series, so far we have more than 70 talks very well archived on our YouTube channel. So if you want to receive any update, you just subscribe our YouTube channel, Source to Sink. And at the same time, if you want to receive our weekly notice about the coming talks, you also can follow our Twitter account, Source to Sink. Okay, Professor Juan Restrepo is a full professor from the Department of Earth Science at the University of Effort in Colombia. So if you look at here, he's a marine biology major actually at the beginning, but shifted to more in the marine science, sediment dynamic. He got his PhD from University of South Carolina, 2001, and working with a famous professor there. And then, coming back to Colombia, become a professor, and then retired just last year. But he never retired in the research field, and still very active. His research mainly focused on natural and anthropogenic factors controlling sediment flux to the ocean, particularly focused on the Pacific and the Caribbean basin side, and the Andes Mountain, the north slope and the western slope. And he has conducted many research in the surrounding area. I think I will give the floor to Juan. Juan, now you can share your screen.
Okay, Paul, let's see how it goes. You guys, okay?
Good.
Follow with me, Paul?
Yeah, good. Very good.
Okay, Paul, thank you for inviting me to be part of this amazing archive of presentations of river and delta source to sink. Our presentation today is about the Magdalena River and the impacts of fluvial fluxes into the coastal zone. First, I want to acknowledge the collaboration and guidance of many colleagues, mentors, professors, and friends. Jai Sibinski from CSDMS, Community Surface Dynamic Modeling System, University of Colorado. My former PhD advisor, friend, colleague, and father, Dion Jerv. Also my mentor, Michel Hermelin. Amazing friends and colleagues, Albert Kettner and Robert Brackenridge from the Dartmouth Flood Observatory, Colorado University. Edgardo Latruez, my friend and colleague, now in the Goiás, University of Goiás, Federal University in Brazil. Also Juan Camilo Restrepo, my former grad student, now professor at UniNorte, and doing amazing science in the Magdalena mouth. Keep in mind that this is the bad Restrepo. I am the good one, okay? Flavio Martins, University Algarve, and Alfredo Izquierdo, University of Cádiz in Spain. Marco Tosi, Canadian scientist, three of them working in BASIC project, which is a study that I will mention at the end of this presentation. And these are some recent funding agencies, Academy of Sciences of US, IDRC Canada, and so on. So thanks to all of them for being with me all these years. Well, the first geography of the Northern Andes was developed in the early 1800s by Alexander von Humboldt. When you look at this map of the Northern Andes, it's amazing the precision. Well, actually, we have all these guys, all these rivers so well mapped, all the Amazon rivers draining from the Andes of Colombia, the Magdalena, and so on. So in this presentation, I will try to follow Humboldt's approach, articulating the richness of dispersed data to build an integrated narrative. Well, let's see if I can follow this. Okay, let me put in context to those who are not familiar with the Andes and the region. This is a map of the Andes Cordillera from Bolivia, from El Chaco, sorry, down south. This is the central Andes of the Chaco with the Bermejo and Pilcomayo rivers. Then it comes the central Andes of Bolivia with many important rivers, Mamoré, Beni, Madre de Dios, and Madeira, which is the big guy of the Amazon sediment flux. Then the central Andes of Peru with the important guys, Marañón, Cayali, Yupú, Purús. Then the northern Andes of Ecuador. And then we have the northern Andes and the end of the Cordillera. Keep in mind that once in the Ecuadorian border with Colombia, the Andes Cordillera divides in three branches. Let's go into this digital elevation model. This is Ecuador down here, and we have the Western Cordillera towards the Pacific, the Central Cordillera, and the Eastern Cordillera. So the geography of the Northern Andes is unique in the South American context. All the interactions and factors that occur here are not present along the whole Andes Cordillera. So we have three cordilleras. We have deep valleys, the Magdalena Valley running from south to the Caribbean Sea, to his delta, and the Cauca River in this deep valley, joining the Magdalena in this floodplain called the Mocposina Depression, which is a tectonic depression before the Caribbean. And then we have the Caribbean coast of Colombia, characterized by small drainage basins, but developing big deltas. We will see later on. Okay, this is unique because we have many interesting signals. We have the ENSO signal from the Pacific coming into the Andes. We have the intertropical convergence zone in this region, which shifts north or south depending of the strength of the southwest trade winds or northeast trade winds. Also, we have atmospheric rivers coming from the Amazon basin, coming from the Orinoco basin, coming from the Atlantic Sea, low pressure systems from the Caribbean, plus Madden-Julian waves coming from the Indian Ocean. So this is a very complex region. Okay, let's start by mentioning a short history of previous achievements documenting river deltas of Colombia. When we see this map, the Pacific of Colombia, we have three big deltas, the San Juan Delta, the Patia Delta, and the Mira Delta close to Ecuadorian border. Well, these Colombian deltas were not documented in the scientific literature. When we see this map of the global deltas by James Sivinsky, the only guy present in this archive was the Magdalena. Look that the only delta on the Pacific margin of America is the Colorado here, but we don't have any deltas in the Pacific margin documented late in the 1990s. So these are the less explored deltas worldwide, the Pacific river deltas, and the largest deltas on the Pacific margin of all America. Well, these are the interesting features because they are formed under destructive conditions, including seismic activity in the subduction zone between Nazca and South American plates, destructive conditions, high seismic activity. They have tectonic-induced subsidence, limited accommodation space due to the narrow continental shelf in the subduction zone, and mesotidal range, sea level rise anomalies due to the El Nino events up to 30 centimeters in some years. So these are amazing systems. So we started by documenting the morphodynamics and recent evolution of the San Juan River Delta. Look at the delta, a very low bay delta, interesting one of the most extensive and best developed deltas in the Pacific. Well, we analyze the stratigraphic section, radiocarbon dates, the recent evolution, also the morphological changes in the delta platform since 1800s, sea level anomalies, and so on. This was a work done with Bjorn Jerv, my former PhD advisor, together with other colleagues at the Afit University. Well, we also analyzed all distributary circulation modes, salinity stratification, intrusion, tidal dispersion, together with Bjorn. And then we move south to explore the recent Holocene evolution of the Patia River Delta, which is actually the largest delta on the Pacific coast from Canada down to Chile. It is an interesting system with a sediment yield of 1,500 tons square kilometers per year. And this system is interesting because during the Holocene, nature forced the delta to the south, to this active log. But then a big discharge diversion, human-made in 1972, shifted the delta back to the north, impacting the largest mangrove reserve in South America, in the Pacific South America. Well, together with my colleague Albert Kettner, we documented the sediment budget for the delta, the diversion, and all the morphological changes. And then we also presented morphological changes in the Patia due to the tsunami occurred in 1979, which caused which caused tectonic-induced subsidence. For example, here we see the sea level, relative sea level trend going down, and after the tsunami, it started going up. There are many features of exposed peat soils, subsidence levels, and so on, that we were working on in this delta. Also, just to finish this short history of Pacific and Colombian deltas, we developed a database of physical factors controlling the recent morphology of major Colombian deltas based on fluvial, coastal, oceanographic contributions. So we built multivariate models of explaining variables of main delta characteristics: area of the deltas, delta gradient, number of distributary channels, the total width of distributary channels. So this was an amazing work done with one of my grad students, Sergio Lopez. Okay, now let's move to sediment load databases. Let's review what we knew on sediment loads from the Northern Andes during the 20th century. This is a database of sediment load into the global ocean made by John Milliman and Bob Mead. This is a very nice and widest quoted, cited paper published in Journal of Geology. When you see this database in 1983 by Milliman and Bob Mead, you see that on the west coast of South America, Pacific margin, you only see one tiny arrow, which is the Chira River. Actually, what Milliman and Bob did is they extrapolated the whole sediment load into the Pacific based on one single river in the Pacific. Also, when you see South America, you only see one arrow from the Amazon. Then in 1992, in Journal of Geology as well, Milliman and Sibinski published this database. And still, all these guys from the West Coast, they were not gauged. And then the most updated data from Sibinski and Charles Boros-Marty in 2002, the only guy gauged was the Magdalena. And look at all these brown circles. They were the extrapolation of this single river, the Chira River in Peru. So what we knew of the sediment loads from the western South America were practically unknown. And also the Magdalena were not properly measured, because all these data from the Magdalena were based on NEDECO, Netherlands consultants. They were a group of consultants that visited Colombia in 1972 to establish a hydraulic lab in the Magdalena mouth called Laboratorio Las Flores. And they made some gauging data from 1 year and extracted one single sediment load data into the Caribbean Sea. So we updated, together with my advisor, Bjorn Jurg, the first database of sediment load in the Northern Andes, and published it in Journal of Geology. So we came with different values from the Caribbean and so on. And we updated, this is in Spanish, sorry, but I will translate, that the Pacific rivers are delivering to the Pacific Ocean 96 million tons per year, with a corresponding sediment yield of 1260 tons per kilometer per year. Actually, what we found is that the Pacific River have twice the sediment yield of the Caribbean basins. When looking at the relationship between sediment yield and basin area, and comparing to Southeast Asia rivers, we see that the Colombian rivers in red fit well the global trend, but also that the Colombian rivers have much higher sediment yields than the big guys in South America, Orinoco, Amazon, and Paraná. Also, I want to mention this work with my colleague, professor, friend, and buddy, Edgardo Latrues, probably one of the top fluvial geomologists in the world. Together with Edgardo, we published in geomorphology probably the most updated sediment budget for the whole Andean Cordillera. So we analyzed more than 100 gauging stations from Colombia to down to Patagonia. And we built the sediment budget, sediment yield from the Cordillera. We compare sediment yield, for example, with annual water yield of different regions in the Andes, northern Peru, Bolivia, Chaco, Argentina, and so on. And quite interesting is that the water does not seem to explain sediment yield spatial variability. When we see the black triangles, which are the northern and Pacific rivers, we see that a wide dispersion in sediment, in water yield for the same magnitude of sediment yield. Anyways, the Bolivian guys appear to have the highest sediment yield in the whole Andes Cordillera. But interesting, when comparing the Andes average in different regions with Himalaya, South Insular Asia, New Zealand, Taiwan, we see that the Andes sediment yield is of the same magnitude as other orogenic systems. This is contrary to what believed before, that only Himalaya and Taiwan had amazing values of sediment yield and the highest one. Here we document that we show that the Andes is quite important and similar to all these big orogenic systems. Well, before we get into the sediment load data of the Magdalena River, let's see evidences of environmental degradation in Colombia, which have promoted soil erosion and sediment fluxes. This is an amazing picture of illegal mining in the Pacific drainage basins. Well, we know in the global erosion that when we compare natural versus human, there are many sources and many evidences that the global erosion due to human causes compared to natural process are 1 order of magnitude or 2 order of magnitude larger than the natural processes. Global sediment flux as well, 1 or 2 order of magnitude. Actually, Antonio Cendrero, this famous geomorphologist, the Spanish, used to say, used to present that we are not experiencing a climate change. We are rather experiencing a global geomorphic change. So since La Niña event in 2010-2011, the strongest on record in Colombia, decision makers and politicians and environmental managers began blaming climate change for all floods, slides, and erosion in the Colombian mountains. These are common pictures during these floods events. These are common in the Colombian media, all these news, environmental nightmare, drought, deforestation, illegal mining, and so on. Well, it has been shown that in the Andes, Peru and Colombia are the major hotspots of deforestation and erosion due to gold mining. These are the hotspots in the Andean of Peru, and these are the hottest spots of illegal mining and gold mining actually this polygon is the Magdalena Basin. Well, when looking at the Magdalena drainage basins, we see all these yellow spots in which there is the mining going on, and the trend of GDP and mining are increasing steadily during the last decade. This is illegal mining in the Magdalena Basin as well. Look at this satellite picture, satellite image with all the deforestation and all the erosion and land degradation caused by illegal mining. Well, mercury is called in Colombia the hidden monster in our rivers. For example, some rough assessments have estimated that 200 tons of mercury are transferred to Colombian rivers each year. For example, only in the Magdalena, 100 tons of mercury are deposited in the Magdalena drainage basins. Now let's take a look of deforestation and soil degradation. I want to make this point of land conversion because this is important to see then the trends in sediment load. Contrary what politicians are blaming, that all this is caused by climate change. Well, this is a nature article in which they mentioned that trees are usually worth more than that alive. That is, that land is worth more as pasture or cropland than a virgin forest. This is the main framework that drives deforestation in the tropics. So in Colombia and in the Magdalena, the transformed land has been increasing almost exponentially since the 1800s, according to Andrés Eter, a professor in Universidad Javeriana in Bogotá. But then when using the Holocene carbon emissions data and model for Jet Kaplan, he kindly shared the data for the Magdalena Basin, and we plotted the transformed land and deforestations during the Holocene. And we see interesting that after the Spanish conquest here in 1492, and then after the Spanish established the colonies in South America, deforestation due to gold and agricultural expansion showed a steep increase. So these are the first published assessments of deforestation in the Andes. We see some red spots in Peru as well in Ecuador, but take a look of the Magdalena drainage basins and the Andes Cordilleras. Well, this is a global assessment of drainage basins published by the World Resources Institute in Washington by Carmen Revenga and collaborators. And they just showed here up here that the forest cover in Colombia was 90% below land conversion. And they also showed that more than 75% of the forest cover was logged by 2000. This is the Global Forest Watch platform by University of Maryland. Interesting, in the Magdalena drainage basin, for example, 76% of primary forest in the Magdalena was lost by 2000. These are other assessments of deforestation. In 2000, less than 23% of forest cover left. In 2005, together with the Humboldt Institute in Colombia, we published this map. Less than 15% of vegetation left. And then the deforestation trend by IDEAM, which is the Hydrological Environmental Institute, the public institute in Colombia, was 270,000 hectares per year. Well, this is the first published deforestation assessment done together with my colleague and Professor Jay Sibinsky. It was published in Ambio in 2006, showing the cover, forest cover in the late 70s and late 90s. And we showed that 48% reduction in forest cover were occurring during the 20-year period. And actually that agricultural lands doubled during the same period. Also, when combining two data sets, we also documented that between 2005 and 2010, the highest peak of deforestation occurred in the Magdalena drainage basin. Well, I just want to mention that most of deforestation globally are occurring in the tropics, according to many studies. For example, let's go to agricultural lands and GDP in the Magdalena. These are all the polygons of agricultural expansion in the Magdalena drainage basins, the sustained increased trend of GDP due to agriculture. Actually, these are some scenarios of agricultural lands expansion from Millennium Ecosystem Assessment back in 2005. And what it says is that the practically developing region and tropical regions are the ones that are going to put the land for the agricultural needed for population growth. And finally, talking about deforestation, I want to mention this work by Kim, University of Maryland, published in AGU. And it got a lot of exposure in the media, tropical forests vanishing faster than previously thought. And actually for Colombia, and when we plot all Kim's data for all Latin American countries, Colombia after Brazil has the highest deforestation rate in Latin America. But keep in mind this number, when Kim says 1,500 hectares per year, in Colombia, IDEAM, the public institute of the country, says 270,000 hectares per year. Actually, Kim's is more precise and robust and confident information because this is based on Landsat data and IDEAM is based on MODIS data. You all know that the resolution is very different. Well, these are deforestation in South America. This is the constellation. It looks like a constellation of forest loss. But take a look, all these Brazilian Amazon from Peru, Bolivia, the southern Amazon, and then Tocantins, Araguay, and so on. But also major hotspots of deforestation in 20 years in the Colombian Amazon, and in the Magdalena River Basin as well in the Caribbean of Colombia. Amazing. This is the constellation talking to. This is a zoom of the Amazon basins of Colombia. These are the big deltas on the Pacific, the Patia Delta and the Mira Delta near the Ecuador. All of these deforestation spots on the Pacific and Putumayo and so on are due to cocaine expansion. I will mention this later on. And based on the human footprint in the Northern Andes, in the last almost 40 years, we see the increment between the 70s and almost the 2015 is amazing. And all the major impacts in human footprint is in the Central Andes and the Magdalena Basin. Well, Colombia is not doing very good. This is an article published last year in Science that Colombia's government has not taken action to mitigate deforestation. Okay, let's explore what we knew about natural factors controlling sediment yield. Keep in mind that the erosion depth average over the geographic area and once converted to a sediment mass defines the sediment yield in units, which is mass, length squared, and time. So looking at this scheme, we see that we all know that there are some natural factors controlling erosion: climate, hydrology, soils, geology, topography, morphology, and so on, as well as human activities due to deforestation, agriculture, urbanization, and so on, mining. So when working on the Magdalena drainage basins, we start collecting data from more than 40 gauging stations across the basin. Then this was done with James and other colleagues and Juan Camilo and so on. And then we updated all these drainage, all these gauging stations according to calibration curves and so on, and good data with Albert. We began analyzing the spatial variability of sediment yield. All the West Eastern Cordillera guys are the highest sediment yield. There is a lot of variability in sediment yield across the basin due to the physical variability of physical properties, precipitation, temperature, and so on. So this means that the Magdalena is a challenging system in terms of numerical modeling of sediment load due to these differences in sediment yield. Actually, values range between 128 and 2200 tons per kilometer per year. Well, we found by developing a database of morphometric climatic hydrology variables that explain the physical controls on sediment yield, we found that the runoff and maximum water discharge explain almost 58 of the sediment yield variance. Then we started exploring trends between 1980 and 2010. This is the work together with Jai Sivinsky. And basically we see overall increasing trends after the 90s in some tributary basins, or during the whole period, or after the 90s, as well as in the double mass plots between cumulative sediment load and cumulative water discharge. Interesting high sediment production time and period between the 1995 and 2005. Well, we start applying the Bogart model in the Magdalena to simulate sediment yield, sediment load in the basin. We applied the Bogart model, which was developed and implemented by CSDMS, University of Colorado. All Sivinsky's team was working in this model, and was published by Sivinsky and John Milliman in Journal of Geology in 2007. This model was calibrated for more than 400 rivers worldwide, in different climatic, tectonic, geologic regions. Basically, what it says, this model, is that sediment load can be simulated with this equation, which is the beta term, water discharge, area, the basin area, relief, and temperature. This is a calibration factor, the W, and then the beta factor is decomposed in lithology, trapping efficiency, and human footprint of human factor. They incorporated the human footprint with the GDP of global basins. Since we don't have GDP for small districts within the Magdalena River, we transformed the E factor, the human factor, into deforestation factor. So together with Albert Kettner and Jai Sivinsky, we published this implementation model for the Magdalena in Journal of Geology in 2010. First, we incorporated deforestation rates, those that we already worked with Jai Sivinsky in the 80s and between the 80s and 2005. And we also introduced the lithology factor for the whole Magdalena Basin. Well, we updated the Bogart model with deforestation rates up to 2010, including IDM deforestation rates, all the deforestation indices in the drainage basins, as well the KIM data. And we just published in Anthropocene, together with Albert and Jai, we published the implementation of the model, updating deforestation trends. And keep in mind that we were very interested in see the impact of deforestations between 2005 and 2010. So when incorporating deforestation up to 2010, the Bogart model explains 86% here, 86% of the variance in cumulative sediment load flux from 21 tributary basins in the Magdalena. We see over prediction in some guys here due to retention in reservoirs and floodplains. Well, basically, what we conclude is that 99% of the sediment load in the Magdalena River Basin is due to deforestation. This is when including IDEAM data, the Colombian public institutions, but when including deforestation data from University of Maryland by Kim, the one I showed before, about 30% of sediment flux is due to deforestation. So conservatively speaking, roughly 500 million tons were produced during the last 3 decades due to deforestation at a rate of 16-20 million tons per year. So in other words, the Magdalena has been carrying on his back the sediment load of the Patia River, which forms the largest delta on American Pacific. Okay. These are some economic indicators that promote soil erosion in the Magdalena basins between the 1930s and 2010. Take a look of agriculture, some pulses, interesting pulses in the decadal ones in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And also that agriculture has played a major role in land conversion. Well, when comparing our data from the Bogart model with the Jaisivinsky data published in Science, so during the pre-Anthropocene conditions, the Magdalena might have transported much less 100 and 150 million tons less sediment. So probably this river had between 34 and 84 million tons, but not the 184 million tons that we are documented right now. These are modified Mann-Kendall tests of trends for many tributary basins in the Magdalena. The red color shows the progressive vector and the blue one, the retrograde vector. Dashed lines show statistically confident at the 95% level. So this is the Cauca River, for example, the main tributary basins here on the left, the Cauca River, the main tributary basin of the Magdalena. And this is the Magdalena as gauged at the most downstream station in Calamar. So a statistically significant increase in pulse during the 80s, 90s, and after 2005. Look at here, 80s, 90s, and after 2005. Basically, erosion rates within the Magdalena increased 33% between 2002 and 2010, increasing river sediment load by 44 million tons during the whole period. This is the continuous wavelet transform, revealing statistically robust trends again during the 70s. This is the period, and this is the whole year. This is the period observed by the transform, 70s, 80s, 90s, and as well 2005 and 2010. Well, now we have some 20 minutes left. I just want to give you a fast trip of the impact of fluvial fluxes from the Magdalena into the coastal zone. I want to mention that this scheme of connection, of connectivity of fluxes between drainage basins, floodplains, estuaries, and coastal seas was only appeared in 1992 with the LOIC's IGBP program, Land-Ocean Interaction in the Coastal Zone of the International Geosphere Biosphere Program, IGBP. This is unbelievable that only in 1992 we started to get the conscience that fluxes from drainage basins were impacting coastal seas. But these boxes, that when you look all these boxes, still many countries don't get it. I mean, when we look the Magdalena, for example, the environmental authorities don't speak each other, and actually the fluxes from upstream, downstream are not considered in the environmental agenda in our country, for example. So we started a program, a national program called to socialize and to show the impacts of fluvial transfers from the Andes to the Caribbean Sea and coastal ecosystems. And we call the program Dragging the Mountain Towards the Sea. So it was an amazing program that we were just documenting. We started working with Albert, for example, in Jai Sivinsky, making rough calculations of the sediments trapped in the floodplains of the Magdalena before the entrance to the Caribbean Sea in all these tectonic depression of floodplains in the Mompox region by analyzing modern satellite images, series of images, as SRTM models and so on. And we basically came up with some rough numbers that between 20 and 43% of sediments are trapped in this floodplain, doing some basin trapping efficiency calculation and so on. This is to mention that right now we are using satellite-derived microwave radiometry signal as a tool of estimating near real-time water discharge along the Magdalena. We have done this together with our colleagues of the DFO Observatory, Flood Observatory of Colorado University, together with Albert and Bob Brackenridge. We have calibrated different sections from upstream to downstream in different stations in the Magdalena. There is a good agreement between the model, satellite signal and the gauging data in situ. We have done many comparisons of thresholds, but most importantly, we are ongoing. I mean, we are working on tools to reconstruct a series of floodplain connectivity within the Magdalena River and floodplains. Now, let's keep going down to the coast. I have 15 minutes left. So once the Magdalena, this is the drainage basin, once the Magdalena goes south, we are here in this square. So if we move from here, the Magdalena goes up north to the Caribbean Sea to his delta mouth in the Barranquilla city, but also in the town of Calamar here, there is a man-made branch that connects the Cartagena, the Magdalena River with the Cartagena Bay. Keep in mind that Cartagena is a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. But near Cartagena, so the Canal del Dique, this Dique channel that connects the Magdalena to the Cartagena Bay, and also to other bay called Barbacoas Bay. So if we move from this square down here to this satellite image, we see the Cartagena Bay, the Canal del Dique, the sediment plumes of the Canal del Dique into the Cartagena Bay, as well as the sediment plumes from these bird food deltas that we can appreciate in this image. Look at these beautiful bird food deltas, man-made. These are all hydraulic interventions to alleviate the sediment load into the Cartagena Bay and to deviate the sediment load into this this bay. These bays were coral reefs regions, but we also have these islands, which are called El Rosario Islands, which is the most important national park in Colombia. Okay, we did some coring together with our colleague Edgardo Latrubes back then in University of Texas Austin. Regarding the sediment fluxes into the Caribbean Sea, we started working with data with Beyond Earth and documenting the relation between sediment load and discharge. We also found that the Southern Oscillation Index, the ENSO anomaly, controls almost 70% of the water discharge of the Magdalena to the Caribbean Sea, and that sediment load is also correlated. And we showed that some cross-spectral analysis that the sediment load is in phase with the ENSO in a 3-year period. And then in Global and Planetary Change, we published the first approximation of the impacts of the Magdalena sediment plumes from his delta south to the region, as well as from the Cartagena and from the Barbacoas base into the coral reefs. Well, we found that the increasing trends, for example, in this barrier reef, in the bigger one, in the Isla Grande, that an amazing increase of dead coral platforms, more than 50, almost 60% in almost 20 years. And then when we compared sediment load, water discharge from the Magdalena, sediment load, from the Magdalena, sediment load from the Canal del Dique, and the trends of dead coral, we found a nice coincidence that during these high peaks of turbine plumes and sediment fluxes from the Canal del Dique, it appeared to coincide in good agreement with the dead coral. Well, we found a lot of critics and feedback of this relationship. Someone called it fiction, or that maybe it was a lucky coincidence that dead coral coincided with increasing trends. So since we have to consider that there are other climate change and bleaching events and overfishing and dragging boats and so on, stressing coral reefs. So we just also, to avoid this, we started updating the whole sediment budget into the Barbacoas and Cartagena Bay. We found that almost 125 million tons have been delivered to the coral reefs during the 26 years period. And these are the modified Mine-Kendall tests. This is the Canal del Dique sediment load from the 90s, and a steady increase in sediment load, statistically robust. So together with our colleagues back then in University of Texas, Edward Park, Samia, and Edgardo Latrubes, we calibrated, in situ calibrated a multi-satellite image to capture the spatial variability of suspended sediment in the region. So we built this kind of images during the 16 years monthly average sediment load to show the spatial temporal variability of sediment plumes. Well, we have reconstructed time series of sediment fluxes here. I'm not going to stay in this slide too much. Coral reefs, but we found that coral reef waters were exposed to river plumes between 20 and almost 50% time of the entire period of analysis. Actually, when we see different regions in these Bose whisker plots, we see that all values were above 10 milligrams per liter of sediment concentration. And keep in mind that the threshold for healthy coral reefs are below 5 milligrams per liter. Well, we also do some lead to 10 dating, and again in some cores in the Dique Delta in Cartagena Bay, and look at these pulses during the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, some in the 90s, and again 2005 and 2010. Actually, the cores contains elements with heavy metals, and their concentrations are frequently above the ecologically accepted standards, as seen in this pink dashed line. So, well, and finally, I'm just 5-10 minutes to finish this presentation. Finally, we are also running a project, multi-million project, funded by IDRC Canada, International Development Research Center, called BASIC, which is Basin Sea Interactions with Communities. This is a project in the Cartagena Bay here to connect the impact of the Magdalena sediment and water discharge and pollution loads into the Cartagena Bay, and see the connections of this pollution, the connections and the relationship between this pollution with public health, water quality, as well as fisheries toxicology. So we have built interesting analysis of this dispersion of sediment plumes, nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and so on. We have documented quite well that the Cartagena Bay has some similar hypoxic values compared to the Gulf of Mexico. Actually, during many months of the year, more than the whole bottom of the bay, from 4 meters depth down to 30 meters depth, are in anoxic conditions. We have also documented that the sediments from the base bottom have concentrations, very high concentration of cadmium, chromium, copper, mercury, nickel, lead to 10, and so on. But also, we have made an assessment of an integrated approach of land-based pollution by monitoring effluent, GIS analysis, previous published data. So we have quantified different sources, domestic industry, and the Canal del Dique Magdalena River, to come up with with basic numbers or responsibilities of the pollution in the Cartagena Bay. So let's summarize the main findings in 20 years. Sorry for this crowded slide, but since I don't think in English, sometimes I need to read in English. Okay, sediment production in the Andes is of the same magnitude as compared to global orogenic belts, as we saw in this work with Edgardo Latrues for the sediment budgets in the whole Andes Cordillera. Contrary as evidenced before, the Pacific and rivers of Colombia do not hold the top one in South America in terms of sediment yield. Back then, in that work and analysis done with Beyond Earth, we actually mentioned that the western rivers in South America, the Pacific rivers of Colombia, were the ones having the highest sediment yield in all South America. With this new sediment budget for the Andes Cordillera, we found that the Bolivian catchments are the major sediment producers in the Andes. Well, the Magdalena is the major contributor of sediments into the Caribbean Sea, holding a number between 184 and 220 million tons per year. This is suspended sediment load, and when combining suspended and bed load, it could be 100 to 20 million tons per year. It has the highest basin-wide sediment yield of any South American river into the Atlantic Ocean, with roughly 720 million tons square kilometer per year. And keep in mind that although this river is not is not a large one, it's a medium-sized river, it is in the top 10 globally in terms of QS. Increasing trends of sediment flux from the Magdalena has been observed in the 80s, 90s, and 2010, which are in close agreement with deforestation rates and GDP pulses of economic indicators. Depending on deforestation data, the Bogart model implementation reveals that between 10 and 30% of sediment flux is due to deforestation. Well, the Magdalena has been carrying on his back a Patia River due to deforestation. More than 70% of the Magdalena drainage basin is under strong erosional conditions. Sediment flux to the coastal zone has experienced sustained increasing trends since the 1990s. Well, down, as I said, as I mentioned a few moments ago, coastal coral reefs has been exposed to Magdalena sediment plumes between 20 and 50% of the whole time period between 2002 and 2005. Well, we have also saw turbidity levels that reefs are practically surviving in a delta conditions of river mouth conditions. There are important concentration of heavy metals in the region, most of them not coming from the industries in the Cartagena Bay. About 30% of hypoxia, eutrophication, and high levels of turbidity in Cartagena are due to the Magdalena water and sediment fluxes. And finally, the Magdalena fluxes are strongly linked to the environmental degradation in the Andes. And these fluxes have produced a major hotspot pollution in the whole Caribbean, which is the Cartagena Bay. Well, some final thoughts. I have 2 minutes maybe. The cost of deforestation. This is the former Vice Minister of Environment many years ago. There were some exercises of quantifying the cost of deforestation in Colombia. We have lost probably more than, right now, more than 10 million hectares of natural forests. The country should invest probably more than 30 billion to restore the forest plus. This is the tax reform. This is half of the tax reform that the country is fighting right now. All the riots and so on in Colombia right now is for 10 billion or 15 billion tax reform. So we need maybe more than $50 billion to recover deforestation. Back then, Liliana Dávalos, former University of South Carolina scientist, was documented the cocaine deforestation and cocaine crops in Colombia. Look at the Magdalena drainage basin here. So this is to mention that cocaine is not only about violence and drugs and terrorism. Most of people outside of the country in Europe, US, and other countries look Colombia like cocaine is a problem of terrorism and violence and so on. No, cocaine is an environmental problem. Look at all this picture, deforestation. This is in the Cauca River, Magdalena drainage basin. Look at this landslides, land degradation, desertification in the Magdalena Mountains due to cocaine. So actually major delta outlets are showing signs of chemical pollution due to cocaine labs. So this is not a joke. I mean, cocaine is a serious threat. There are some rough numbers by United Nations Office of Drugs and Conflict, just mentioning that maybe 1/3 of Colombian deforestation is due to cocaine. So this is a serious connection here with sediment load. Well, the World Bank, this is one of a serious and good document trying to calculate erosion in Colombia. So they say that maybe soil erosion costs about 3 billion per year in Colombia, land degradation. Okay, so I want to finish with this sentence from David Montgomery, professor at the University of Washington at Seattle. What you come away with this is that is the lesson that societies that don't take care of their soil don't last. Okay, Paul and assistants and all of you, thank you for your time.
Oh, Juan, this is a fantastic talk. And it's very informative and also a great summary review, not only the Magdalena River, but also the surrounding area, not only the natural science, but also the societal impact. I like it very much. You not
sorry. See, keep going.
Yeah, you not only talk about the sediment load change, but also the chemical pollution, toxic, ecosystem impact to the coral reef. This is fantastic. This is exactly the source to think need. And, in Caribbean Sea area, the Puerto Rico face the similar thing, because the increased, the sediment cost somehow contribute to the coral reef degradation. But anyway, so I will open the floor to our audience. I saw Albert here and a couple more colleagues. Please go ahead to unmute yourself, ask a question. There's a couple comments in the chat room. They had a great talk. Thank you, Professor. And so, anybody have any question? Albert, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you, Paul, and well, thank you, Juan.
Buddy.
What a blessing to wake up and hear your talk. My rest of the week is in heaven. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, buddy.
The work, and we talked about this years ago, your work on the sediment fluxes and how they impact coral reefs, right? And you showed that in the last part of your talk. But in the beginning of your talk, you talked more about, or you showed some numbers about illegal mining and the mercury pollution. And so if you differentiate, if you could differentiate between the sediment increases that affect the coral reefs versus the increases in chemicals and mercury and heavy metal that also increases, I presume, and reaches the coral reefs. What is impacting the coral reefs more? Is it the sediment concentration that increases and that negatively impact the coral reef, or is it more the chemical pollution that impacts, or is it really, do we not know yet, and is more research needed to figure this out?
Amazing question, Albert. We have not calculated let's see, the footprint inside the coral reef about pollution. There is a paper I did not mention in Marine Pollution Bulletin that we published doing some detecting heavy metals in the coral reefs. And there is a very there are very good evidences that these reefs are accumulating heavy metals. I did not mention that paper because of time constraints and so on. But let me explain it this way. When you dive these coral reefs, you move your hand like this, you see the whole suspended sediment above the reefs, just going in suspension. You do this and they go in suspension. We know that once all these polyps, the small guys in the corals, they get sediments, they got into hypoxia and they die. And they expulse the associated algae, the zooxanthellae, and then the coral die. So one of the main stressors is for sure is sediment, is suspended sediment in the region. There are important levels right now of heavy metals and pollutants going into these reefs. But Albert, I think the first trigger and driver to tell the corals, the polyps, okay, guy, boom, is sediment concentration and reduce salinity levels. Yeah.
Mm.
Then, okay, pollutants and so on may induce illness, bacteria and other kind of triggers with sickness and so on in the corals. But the first trigger to kill the polyp is reduce salinity and expose sediment concentration. Maybe it's not the way you expected the answer, because of course you expected numbers or something like that. But yeah, I agree. Further research is needed to quantify at which level between sediments and pollution are threatening these coral reefs. Yes.
Thank you, Juan. I have one other question, but let's first hear Flavio.
Yeah.
Yes.
Flavio Martins. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Flavio.
Hi, Juan. How are you? Thank you so much for this wonderful, so interesting presentation.
Thank you, Flavio.
Illustrative. Thank you so much. Just a question regarding, so it's a little bit on the same topic of Albert, regarding the discharge of sediments into the coastal zone and especially on coral reefs. Do you think the discharges, specifically on the Caribbean Sea, the discharges will affect the corals on a local basis? I would say a few kilometers around the mouth of the sea and the mouth of the Cartagena Bay? Or do you think it will be a more general dispersion in a more wider zone? Do you have satellite images to explain that or something like that?
Thank you, Flavio, for this question. Actually, I'm gonna share the screen once again, and where is the and going to going to this map. Flavio, are you looking this slide?
No, Juan, you need to share the screen again.
Okay, I need to share the screen again. Okay.
Yeah, coming.
Now it's coming?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's coming?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, Flavio, this is, we have been together in this place.
Yeah.
For all of you that don't know Flavio, Flavio is a colleague and one of the top oceanographers modeling, numerical modeling oceanographers working in CIMA, University of Algarve. CIMA is the Center of Marine and Environmental Institute in Algarve, Portugal. And Flavio is our advisor, friend, colleague, working in the basic project of Cartagena Bay, doing numerical modeling of circulation and so on. So Flavio has been with us in the region many times. So Flavio, south these islands, these coral reefs islands del Rosario, near Cartagena Bay, there are other islands, archipelago south here, okay? Mm-hmm. That archipelago is called San Bernardo Islands. Mm-hmm. Well, the park extended, the National Coral Reef Park extended south. So all this square, if you drag all this square south, you combine the whole park, formed by these islands that, and the San Bernardo Islands, south here. San Bernardo Islands are exposed to the Sinú River Delta in the Morrosquillo Gulf. Actually, Sara Moron, who was also doing a lecture here in this webinar, isn't it, Paul? Sara Moron. She was working on this. She was talking about Sinú Delta and so on. But the Sinú Delta is a well-controlled river, dammed upstream, and most of the sediment plumes are being practically captured before it gets the Caribbean Sea. It's not the same example as the Dique Channel. And these reefs don't get the plumes from the Magdalena, don't get the plumes either from the Canal del Dique, south here. Mm-hmm. So these systems show much less coral mortality and much less turbid conditions that these guys next to the El Dique, Cartagena, and the Magdalena plume. So just to answer your question, Flavio, I wouldn't expect that all these plumes keep going south and impacting the other coral reefs. Okay. So actually, Flavio, there is also to answer your question, here, we have been here, there is another coral reef. It's not an island, but this is a beautiful shoal of corals here where they are moving offshore of the Cartagena. And this region is well conserved. Actually, it's not being impacted by these plumes in the same level that all these guys here. Is that clear for you?
Yes, thank you so much. I was thinking more about, there is another park south from here, is the Corales de Profundidad.
Oh,
I was wondering if it would be impacted by the plume of the Canal del Dique.
Oh, that's a good one. But let me change the way you ask this. We have been, since the Cartagena is a major port, is the main port of Colombia right now. This is a navigation channel that has to be dredged on a daily basis, actually, to maintain the channel of incoming ships, okay? We have noticed there are some waste regions in which these guys, dredging companies, move all the sediment
I see.
And put all the sediments up here. I am not a deep diver in coral reefs, but some colleagues of Universidad de los Andes in Colombia, they have been doing deep diving in all these coral platforms. I mean, when I say deep diving, is in the talud, in more than 60 meters depth, and they have extracted some sediments from these bottoms, deep bottoms in these regions, and actually they look like a continental or Cartagena's Bay sediments. There is no published data about this, but in personal communication, they bet that these sediments are from all these waste regions of dredging sediments from the bay. So just to answer your question, I bet that these coral reefs are being in the deep zone, are being impacted on one way or the other way, but all these sediments are flowing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah.
Cool.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Okay, let's see if any other people before Albert ask again. Any other question from the audience? Okay, Albert, go ahead.
Thank you, Paul. And so Juan, I want to go back to the Magdalena River. So there is this controversial plan of the government to make the Magdalena River more navigationable, right? So to make the river more how do you say that? Yeah, so ship traffic and dredge it and everything, right? Okay, so you in the beginning you said something like, okay, humans can alter the sediment flux by 1 or 2 magnitude, right? And then when you show data from the Magdalena, it was roughly, estimates are around, I think 30, maybe 40% of the sediment load can be explained by human impact. So that means that humans, the river can even more respond probably to humans when the impact is becoming more and more. And it looks like it's going that trend, right? With deforestation still continuing. So when they're doing this engineering project, they must look back at the data, kind of, okay, what is the sediment flux roughly now? And make the project such that it can that it can transport that amount of sediment, I hope. But do they look into the future and think about this sediment flux could actually increase and could increase quite a bit, right? Only 30% versus 1 or 2 magnitude, right? Where the flux might increase quite significantly. Do you get any understanding of that project, where it is, and if they take this potential increased sediment flux into account? Or do you think it's going to be, if they're going to continue with this engineering project, is it going to be a disaster in 10, 15 years because of the increased sediment flux?
Amazing question, Al. Let's start by explaining that all these projects about the navigation, to making more efficient the Magdalena Channel for communication between different regions of the country, to get lower costs of all the transport from the mountains to the ports in Cartagena, which is basically what the country is needing right now, because trucks costs are too high. We have no trains, so they are basically saying that the only way we have to lower the cost of transports and so on is the Magdalena. But when you see the technical reports of the project, the design of the project, you see that the river is still studied, analyzed, and it will be in the intervention, the hydraulic intervention is in separate boxes. They only consider the box in the middle section X, the box in the downstream section Y, the box in the close to the cost box, the box in the mouth, the box. They analyze and model these boxes with fluxes and so on. But they do not see the whole picture of these boxes connected. They do not care about upstream, downstream, lateral connectivity, and so on. They do not care. I have seen all these reports and designs, and they treat the river in separate boxes. So that's the main problem.
Okay.
When you look all these reports, also technical reports and proposals, they have no future scenarios of sediment load. They don't care about that.
Okay.
They say that they can control erosion by dredging the river. So they do not visualize the future of the costs of if we are going to have this sediment production and this in 50 years, what will be the cost of dredging? They don't have that number either. So Albert, just to finish, I mean, we can stay talking about this, but just to finish this question, Albert, it's a mess. It's a mess.
Thank you.
Cool. Anybody else?
Mayor?
Yoshi, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, my boss.
Oh.
Boss.
Yeah, wonderful.
I'm a little bit. It's like having a dissertation defense with my.
No. I have enjoyed so much. Thank you very much. Yeah, and I have two questions. And one is the dams impact in Colombian River. Yeah, another one is a sediment composition changes, sand and silt clay in source area, sediment yield and suspension due to the deforestation.
Thank you, Josie, for these questions. Well, the bigger dams in Colombia are in the Magdalena drainage basin. Actually, 70% of the hydrothermal energy in Colombia comes from the Magdalena. So we have big, but the biggest, there is another one, a new one in the middle reaches, but the bigger dams are in the upstream section. So the cumulative impact of sediment retention of these dams is in the upper, let's say less than 2% of the whole drainage basin is in the upper section. So the damage of sediment retention and so on by these dams is in other tributary systems, but not in the main Magdalena.
I see.
Okay, you got it? Okay.
Yeah.
But we built we are building. It will be operating next year. The largest dam in the whole country, called Hidroituango. Is on the Cauca River, close to Medellin city, and is in the Cauca River, the main tributary of the Magdalena. There are no any assessment mentioning the future impacts on the Cauca morphology and on the flood plains of the tectonic depression of the Momposina tectonic depression about this huge dam. There are no studies about that. So still, the coming dams, which will operate, will have an added impact, Joshi, maybe in the future 20, 30, or 50 years, but not right now. Okay, mentioning the sediment, the type of sediment variability and so on due to deforestation. There are no studies evaluating the different characteristics of sediments in different regions of the river and not, and we don't have data about the sediment quality, sedimentology differences, and how about deforestation have changed the sediment characteristics in the region. No, Joshi, we have no data about that. Yeah, sorry.
I see.
Very good. Very good. So Juan, the last quick question. So how about the hurricane? Is the hurricane caused the storm, near the river mouth, the delta, could also, suspend the sediment to cause them further damage, kill the coral reef?
Well, the Magdalena forms a triangular delta. It's actually a wave and fluvial dominated delta. This is in a macrotidal zone. So Magdalena receives high energy waves from the northeast trade winds. There are documented waves more than 3 meters height and so on in the Magdalena delta. But keep in mind that once the river gets into the Magdalena mouth, there is a huge tectonic canyon in the Caribbean. So we have that most of these sediments, I mean, I'm talking the bed load, for example, it goes down to the canyon. Canyon is just in front of the mouth.
So
that Magdalena doesn't build a table or a protruding delta in a wide continental shelf. Okay, is that okay, Paul?
Yeah, good. Yeah, okay. But anyway, it's already 10:30 US Eastern time. I know it's already after midnight for Yoshi. Yeah, Juan, do you want to say anything?
Paul, yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
When do I get the pay bill of this conference?
So I'm sorry, can you say again what?
Just teasing you. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
Paul, thank you so much for inviting me. I recognize and I accept that this kind of seminars are for big fishes, for big guys, for brilliant minds, not for this type of anyway.
Well, you are great. You are the one of the great guys. You are one of the big fish now. Okay, thank you very much. It's fantastic. I think it's a little bit longer today, but we have such a great talk. As I posted the link already on the chat room, you can rewatch Juan's fantastic talk on our YouTube. So I see you next week. Paul will talk about the Yukon River, and so Juan, thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so thank you, Yoshi. Already past the midnight in Japan, and so many other people. And okay, I see you next week. I hope you have a great summer break. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all.